Billionaire CEO's romantic dinner with his fiancée turns silent when his ex walks in with the child he denied. "She's mine." Paul's voice cracked as he said the words not as a question but as a devastating realization 5 years too late. Sharon looked at him across the restaurant table where her daughter sat coloring, completely unaware that the man who had just interrupted their dinner was the father who had denied her existence before she was even born. "She's mine," Sharon corrected him, her voice steady in a way that came from surviving the unsurvivable. "I raised her. I was there for every fever, every nightmare, every first day of school. You wrote a check and walked away. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. There's a difference." The little girl looked up from her coloring page, her dark curly hair pulled back with blue ribbons, her eyes the exact shade of gray that had looked out from Westbrook family portraits for generations. Eyes that now studied Paul with innocent curiosity. "Mama, who is this man? Why does he look so sad?" And in that moment, watching his daughter ask her mother who he was, Paul Westbrook understood that all his billions, all his acquisitions, all the empire he had built meant absolutely nothing, because the most important thing he would ever create was sitting 3 feet away from him, and she had no idea he existed. This is the story of a man who had everything except the only thing that mattered, a woman who lost everything and built herself back stronger, and a little girl who would teach them both what love actually looks like. But to understand how we got to this moment, we need to go back to the beginning of the evening. Before Paul knew his carefully constructed life was about to collapse, before Sharon walked through those restaurant doors carrying 5 years of secrets, before a child's innocent question would shatter a billionaire's entire world. Let's start there. The crystal chandeliers of La Maison d'Or cast golden shadows across white linen tablecloths as Paul Westbrook raised his champagne flute. Across from him sat Amanda Sinclair, her diamond engagement ring catching light like a captured star. 3 months engaged. 6 months until the wedding that would unite 2 of Manhattan's most influential families. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. At 41, Paul had mastered the art of control. His hedge fund had grown from his father's modest investment firm into a $2.3 billion powerhouse. His penthouse overlooked Central Park. His name appeared in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal with reliable frequency. He had learned that success came from managing every variable, eliminating uncertainty, and never letting emotion compromise strategy. "To us," Paul said, his voice carrying that smooth confidence that had closed 100 deals. "To our future." Amanda smiled the way she always did, perfectly, beautifully, without disturbing the careful architecture of her expression. She was 34, blonde, accomplished in her own right as a luxury real estate developer. She was exactly the kind of woman who belonged beside a man like Paul Westbrook. Their engagement announcement had appeared in the society pages like an inevitability rather than a surprise. "To our future," she echoed, touching her glass to his. The restaurant hummed with the quiet conversation of people who could afford $400 tasting menus without flinching. Paul had reserved their usual table, the one by the window with the view of Central Park, positioned so he could see the entire room while appearing focused solely on his companion. Old habits from his trading floor days, when missing information could cost millions, which is why he saw her the moment she walked in. Sharon. The name hit him like a physical blow. His champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. His heart stopped beating for what felt like an entire minute. 5 years since he had seen her face, but recognition was instantaneous and devastating. She had changed. Her dark hair was longer now, swept back in an elegant twist that spoke of money and confidence. She wore a burgundy dress that was clearly designer, the kind of understated elegance that came from actually having taste rather than just the budget to fake it. Everything about her radiated a quiet power that the Sharon he remembered had only hinted at. But her eyes, those deep brown eyes that had once looked at him like he was the answer to every question she had ever asked, those eyes were exactly the same. And beside her, holding her hand with the unconscious trust of childhood, was a little girl. The child was perhaps 4 or 5 years old. She wore a blue velvet dress with white tights, her dark curly hair pulled back with ribbons that matched her outfit. She was talking animatedly about something, gesturing with her free hand while Sharon listened with the kind of attention parents give when they are actually hearing every word. Paul's grip tightened on the edge of the table. His mind started calculating dates, doing math he had refused to do 5 years ago. Math he had dismissed as impossible, as manipulation, as a problem to be solved with a check rather than a commitment. The room seemed to tilt. The champagne turned to acid in his throat. "Paul?" Amanda's voice came from somewhere far away. "You've gone pale. Are you feeling all right?" He could not answer, could not look away, could not do anything except stare at the little girl who had his mother's curls, his grandmother's delicate features, his own gray eyes looking out from a small, serious face that was studying the restaurant's decor with obvious interest. The maitre d' was leading Sharon and the child across the dining room. Their path would take them directly past Paul's table, toward the small private alcove where families with children were seated away from the main dining area. "Paul?" Amanda's voice had sharpened. "Who is that woman? You're staring." "No one," he managed, the lie tasting like ash on his tongue. "Someone I knew. Years ago." But Sharon had seen him now. Their eyes met across 30 feet of expensive real estate, and Paul watched recognition transform her face. Not shock. She had clearly known he might be here. Not fear. She had outgrown whatever intimidation his presence once held. Something more complex settled into her expression. Satisfaction, perhaps. The quiet confidence of someone who had survived something terrible and emerged stronger than before. "Before we continue with this pivotal moment, I need to speak directly to you. If you have ever made a choice you regret, if you have ever wondered whether the mistakes of your past can be forgiven, if you have ever believed that people can change, or doubted that they ever really do, then this story is for you. I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story is going to challenge everything you think you know about redemption, forgiveness, and what it really means to become a better person. Now, let us return to that restaurant, to the moment when Paul Westbrook's carefully constructed life began to fall apart. The maitre d' guided Sharon and the child directly toward Paul's table. There was no avoiding it, no pretending he had not seen her, no escape from the collision that was about to occur. "Sharon," he said, standing without quite meaning to. Protocol demanded he acknowledge acquaintances. 5 years of distance demanded he pretend this was casual. His voice betrayed him, coming out strained and uncertain. "Paul." Her voice was steady, warm even. The kind of warmth that came from having nothing left to prove. "I heard you got engaged. Congratulations. Thank you." He glanced at Amanda, who was watching this exchange with the sharp attention of someone assembling puzzle pieces. His fiancée missed nothing. She had not built a real estate empire by being unobservant. "This is my fiancée, Amanda." "Amanda, this is Sharon. We knew each other, years ago. Knew each other." Sharon repeated the words with something that might have been amusement or might have been pain. That's one way to describe it. The little girl tugged at Sharon's hand with the impatience of hungry children everywhere. "Mama, I'm hungry. You promised pasta." "I know, sweetheart. Just a moment." Sharon looked down at her daughter with such obvious love that Paul felt something twist in his chest, a feeling he could not name and did not want to examine. "This is my daughter, Grace." "Grace, can you say hello, Paul?" Grace looked up at him with those familiar eyes. His mother's eyes, the Westbrook eyes that had looked out from portraits in the family estate for generations. She studied him with the unfiltered assessment that only children possess. "Hello," she said politely. "Are you Mama's friend?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Paul found himself kneeling down to Grace's level, moved by something he could not control. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. The shape of her face, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the slight furrow between her eyebrows that appeared when she was concentrating. "First, yes, your mother and I were friends a long time ago." "Cool." Grace was clearly unimpressed by adult acquaintances. She had pasta on her mind and no patience for interruptions. "Can we eat now, Mama?" "Yes, baby. Let us go find our table." Sharon's hand found Grace's shoulder protectively, a gesture that spoke of years of being the only barrier between her daughter and the world. "It was unexpected seeing you, Paul. Enjoy your dinner." She walked past him without looking back, guiding Grace toward the private alcove where a table for two waited. Paul stood frozen, watching them go, watching his daughter disappear around a corner without knowing she had just met her father. "Paul," Amanda's voice was ice now. "Sit down. People are staring." He sat. The champagne had gone flat. The celebration had curdled into something unrecognizable. His hands were trembling slightly, and he pressed them flat against the tablecloth to hide it. "Who is she?" Amanda demanded quietly. Her smile remained fixed in place for public consumption, while her eyes promised consequences. And who is that child? It's complicated. Uncomplicated. Now, Paul looked at the woman he was supposed to marry, the future he had carefully constructed, the life that made perfect sense on paper but suddenly felt like a prison built from his own choices. Then he looked toward the alcove where Sharon was probably ordering pasta for a little girl who loved velvet dresses and spoke to strangers politely. A little girl who had his eyes and did not know his name. "I need to talk to her," he said, already standing. "There's something I need to understand." "Paul," Amanda warned, but he was already walking away, already moving toward the private alcove, already heading toward a truth he had spent 5 years refusing to face. Sharon looked up when he appeared at her table. Something in her expression suggested she had been expecting this, perhaps even hoping for it. Grace was absorbed in coloring the children's menu with provided crayons, creating what appeared to be a purple horse with wings. "May the 1st, Paul gestured to the empty chair across from Sharon. She studied him for a long moment, weighing options, calculating risks. Finally, she turned to her daughter. "Grace, sweetheart, I need to talk to this man for a few minutes. Can you color quietly?" "Yes, Mama." Grace did not look up from her purple horse. She was adding stars around it now, filling the margins with constellations. Paul sat. Up close, he could see the changes in Sharon more clearly, the subtle signs of success in her jewelry. Not flashy, but expensive. The confident set of her shoulders. The absence of the uncertainty that had once made her seem so young, despite being only 2 years his junior. "She's mine," he said. "Not a question, a reckoning." "She's mine," Sharon corrected calmly. "I raised her. I provided for her. I was there for every fever, every nightmare, every first day of school. You wrote a check and walked away. I didn't believe. You didn't want to believe. There's a difference." Sharon's voice held no anger, which somehow made it worse. Anger he could have fought. This quiet certainty was impenetrable. Believing would have meant changing your plans. "I wasn't part of your plans, Paul. I was a pleasant distraction that became inconvenient." The accuracy of her assessment cut deep. Every word landed like a blade, because every word was true. "I was wrong," he said. "Yes, you were." She took a sip of water. Perfectly composed. A woman who had stopped needing his validation years ago. But wrong or right doesn't change the past. "I didn't come here tonight to confront you. I didn't even know you'd be here. La Maison d'Or is a client. I designed their new location in Boston, and they offered a complimentary dinner whenever I'm in town. I accepted because Grace loves pasta. A client." Paul absorbed this. "You're in design now?" "Interior architecture. I have a firm, Blackwell Design. 12 employees, offices in Boston and Chicago. We specialize in hospitality spaces, hotels, restaurants, boutique retail." She smiled slightly, and there was pride in it. Earned pride. The kind that came from building something from nothing. "I built something, Paul. While you were building your empire, I was building mine. And I was raising Grace. Simultaneously. The weight of what he had dismissed 5 years ago settled over him like a physical burden. Not just a pregnancy. Not just an inconvenience to be handled with a check. But a person. A capable, brilliant person who had transformed adversity into achievement. "I want to know her," he said. "Grace, I want." "You want?" Sharon's voice sharpened for the first time. "What about what she needs? What about what I need? You don't get to show up 5 years late and claim parental rights because you suddenly feel guilty over champagne and caviar. That's not—" "Mama?" Grace looked up from her coloring. Her gray eyes moved between them, assessing, reading the tension that adults always thought they hid from children and never actually did. "Why is the man still here? Is he bothering you?" Sharon's expression softened immediately. Her whole demeanor changed when she looked at her daughter, the warrior becoming the protector. "No, sweetheart. We're just talking. Adult conversation." "Okay." Grace returned to her artwork, adding wings to her purple horse. She was creating something magical, something that could fly away from anything that tried to hurt it. "She's protective," Paul observed quietly, "of you. We protect each other. That's what happens when it's just the two of you against the world." Sharon met his eyes directly. "I didn't tell her about you, Paul. I didn't poison her against you or make you into a villain. I simply left you out of the story. Father, unknown. A blank space where you should have been. The The words landed like physical blows. Unknown. A blank space. That was what he had been to his own daughter for 5 years. Not a villain. Not even a disappointment. Just nothing. An absence. A question mark on a form. "I want to fill that space," he said, his voice rough. "I know I don't deserve." "You're right. You don't." Sharon's voice was still calm, but something underneath had cracked. 5 years, Paul. 5 years of wondering if she'd ever ask where her father was. 5 years of preparing answers that wouldn't hurt her while being honest about the truth. You denied her existence before she was even born. You looked me in the eye and told me you didn't believe my child was yours. I was wrong. You were cruel. The word hung between them, heavy and undeniable. I loved you. I thought we had a future. And when I needed you most, you chose to believe I was a liar, rather than accept that your perfectly planned life might need to change. Paul had no defense. Every accusation was accurate. Every word was deserved. He had been cruel. He had been a coward. He had thrown away something precious because it did not fit his timeline. "What happened to us?" Sharon asked suddenly. "I've spent 5 years analyzing it, and I still don't understand. We were happy. We talked about everything. And then you just shut down. Decided I was a problem to be solved instead of a person to be loved." "Fear," Paul admitted. The honesty tasted strange after years of justification. Years of telling himself he had made the practical choice. The smart choice. You were the first person I'd loved who actually saw me. The real me, not the version I perform for investors and board members. And that terrified me, because if you really saw me and eventually left, I'd have to accept that I wasn't worth staying for. So you left first. So I left first. And I told myself every lie necessary to make it feel like the right choice. Silence stretched between them. Grace hummed softly while she colored, adding a castle for her winged horse to fly toward, creating a world where beautiful things could escape to safety. "Your fiancée is watching us," Sharon observed. "She looks concerned." Paul did not turn around. He could imagine Amanda's expression, the calculation behind her eyes, the reassessment of everything she thought she knew about the man she had agreed to marry. "I imagine she does. You should go back to her. Have your celebration. Get married. Live the life you planned." Sharon's voice had gentled slightly. "Not with forgiveness, but with finality. I didn't come here to disrupt your world, Paul. I came here for pasta with my daughter. What if I don't want that life anymore?" The question surprised them both. Paul had not planned to say it, had not even fully thought it, but the words were out now, hanging in the air between them like a declaration of intent. Sharon studied him carefully, looking for deception, looking for manipulation, the defensive instincts of someone who had been burned badly and learned to protect herself. "You don't get to decide that over dinner," she said finally. "You don't get to see Grace and suddenly transform into the father you should have been. That's not how redemption works. Then how does it work? Slowly, painfully, through consistent action over time, not grand gestures in expensive restaurants." Sharon gathered her composure. "If you're serious, and I mean genuinely serious, not guilty over champagne serious, then we can talk. But not tonight. Tonight, I'm having dinner with my daughter. You're having dinner with your fiancé. And we're all going to process this like adults." She was right. Of course she was right. Sharon had always been the wisest person he knew, seeing clearly while he constructed elaborate justifications for his worst impulses. "Can I have your number?" he asked. "To call. To talk. About next steps." Sharon hesitated. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. It was elegant, simple, Blackwell design, with her name and contact information in tasteful typography. "This is my office. Call Monday. We'll talk." Paul took the card like it was something precious, like it was the first real thing he had held in 5 years. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I haven't agreed to anything except a conversation." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the full weight of a mother's protection. "And Paul, whatever you decide about Grace, about us, about your life, make sure it's what you actually want, not what guilt demands or what looks good to others. Actually want, because if you start this and walk away again, you'll destroy that little girl. And I will never forgive you." The warning was clear. He understood it completely. "I won't walk away again," he said. "I promise. Your promises didn't mean much before. I know. Let me prove this one." He stood and walked back toward his table, carrying Sharon's business card in his pocket like it was a map to a different life. Behind him, he heard Grace's voice. "Mama, why was that man sad?" And Sharon's gentle response. "Sometimes adults are sad about choices they made a long time ago. Can they unmake them? Not always, but sometimes they can make better choices going forward." He did not hear the rest, but those words followed him across the restaurant like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. When Paul returned to his table, Amanda's expression had crystallized into something cold and knowing. She had spent the entire time he was gone putting pieces together, drawing conclusions, making assessments. "That child is yours," she said, not a question. Paul sat down heavily. The chair felt different now. Everything felt different. "Yes, you told me you'd never been married, never had children, that your past relationships ended cleanly. I believe that. I told myself, you lied." Amanda's voice remained perfectly controlled, perfectly pitched for a restaurant where scenes were unthinkable. But beneath the polish was something sharp enough to cut. "You looked me in the eye during our first dinner and painted yourself as a man of integrity who'd simply been too focused on business for serious relationships. And the whole time, there was a child you'd abandoned. I didn't know. You chose not to know. There's a difference." She pulled the diamond engagement ring from her finger. The motion was deliberate, unhurried, the gesture of someone who had already made her decision and was simply executing it. She set the ring on the table between them, where it caught the chandelier light and sparkled with expensive irony. "Amanda, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain." She stood, gathering her clutch with dignified precision. Her posture was perfect. Her expression revealed nothing. She was going to walk out of this restaurant looking like a queen rather than a woman who had just ended an engagement. "I can work with many things, Paul. Difficult schedules, demanding careers, the complications of combining two powerful families. But I cannot build a life with a man who walks away from his own child and convinces himself it never happened." She met his eyes one final time. "You denied that woman. You denied that little girl. And you would have denied me the truth forever if coincidence hadn't forced it into the open. That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are." She walked out without looking back. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with the steady rhythm of certainty. She did not stumble. She did not hesitate. She simply left. Paul sat alone at the table. The engagement ring sparkled between the champagne flutes like a monument to everything he had destroyed. Around him, the restaurant continued its quiet hum of conversation and privilege. No one seemed to notice that a man's entire future had just collapsed in the space of an hour. He signaled the waiter for the check. He paid for a celebration that would never happen. He walked out of La Maison d'Or alone, carrying nothing but Sharon's business card and the weight of 5 years of denial. Now we need to go back before this dinner, before the engagement ring and the expensive restaurant and the collision of past and present. We need to understand how Paul Westbrook became the kind of man who could deny his own child, and how Sharon became the kind of woman who could survive that denial and build an empire from the ashes. Because this story isn't just about tonight. It's about two people who loved each other, who destroyed each other, and who might, against all odds, find their way back to something real. But before we continue with that journey, I need you to do something for me. If you're invested in finding out how this love story became a tragedy, and whether it can ever become something beautiful again, drop a comment right now. Tell me, do you think people who make terrible choices deserve second chances? I read every single comment, and your perspective matters to me. Now let's go back to where it all began. 5 years and 3 months before that dinner at La Maison d'Or, Paul Westbrook walked into a gallery opening in Soho that he never wanted to attend. His colleague Richard had insisted, something about networking and cultural credibility, and the importance of being seen at events that mattered. Paul had calculated the cost-benefit analysis and determined that 2 hours of pretending to care about abstract art was worth the potential business connections. The gallery was crowded with the kind of people who used words like derivative and aesthetic without irony. Paul accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and began his circuit of the room. Smile, handshake, business card, move on. The routine was familiar, comfortable, controllable. And then he saw her. Sharon was standing in front of a massive canvas covered in what looked like controlled chaos. reds and blues and golds swirling together in patterns that suggested emotion without defining it. She was studying the painting with the kind of attention that made Paul pause his networking circuit. She was not beautiful in the conventional way that Manhattan women cultivated. No perfect blonde highlights, no designer dress selected to impress. She wore simple black clothes and silver earrings that looked handmade. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She held her champagne glass like she had forgotten it was there. What Paul noticed most was how she looked at the painting. Like she was having a conversation with it, like it was telling her secrets that no one else could hear. He should have kept walking. He had a circuit to complete, connections to make, the routine to follow. Instead, he walked toward her. "You look like you actually understand what you're seeing," he said. "Which makes one of us." She turned. Her eyes were brown, deep and warm, and entirely unimpressed by the expensive suit he was wearing. "Understanding isn't really the point," she said. "Art isn't a code to be cracked. It's a conversation to be had. And what is this piece saying to you?" She smiled slightly. A genuine smile, not the practiced variety he saw at every networking event. "That depends on who's asking. Are you actually curious, or are you just making small talk?" The directness caught him off guard. Women at these events rarely challenged him. They complimented. They flattered. They angled for whatever advantage they thought he could provide. This woman looked at him like he was a stranger on a subway, irrelevant until he proved otherwise. "Actually curious," he said, surprising himself with the truth. She turned back to the painting, the chaos of color that somehow felt intentional. "It's about transformation," she said. "See how the blue starts controlled at the edges? Precise, measured, and then it moves toward the center and becomes something else entirely. Wilder, less predictable, more alive. That sounds like it could be about a lot of things. Most good art is." She finally took a sip of her champagne. "That's what makes it interesting. It doesn't hand you answers. It asks questions." Paul studied the painting again, trying to see what she saw. The blue at the edges was precise. She was right about that. And as his eyes moved toward the center, he could see how it transformed. How control gave way to something more honest. "What do you do?" he asked, and immediately felt foolish. It was the most basic question, the networking default. She deserved better than his autopilot. But she answered anyway. "I designed this gallery." The space around them suddenly made more sense. The way the lighting fell perfectly on each piece. The flow of the room that guided visitors through the exhibition. The balance between intimacy and openness. "It's beautiful," he said, and meant it. "Thank you." She extended her hand. "Sharon Blackwell." "Paul Westbrook." "I know," she said, shaking his hand briefly. "You're the hedge fund guy. Richard talks about you constantly." That doesn't sound like a compliment. It wasn't. She smiled again, and Paul felt something shift in his chest. "But I prefer to form my own opinions." They talked for 2 hours, missed the rest of the networking circuit entirely, stood in front of painting after painting while Sharon explained what she saw, and Paul tried to see it too. She was smart, wickedly smart. But more than that, she was honest. She did not try to impress him with false sophistication. She did not angle for anything. She simply talked to him like he was a person rather than a portfolio. When the gallery started closing, Paul did something he never did. He asked for her number, not her business card, her actual phone number. "I don't usually do this," she said. "Neither do I." She studied him for a long moment, looking for something. Whatever she found must have been acceptable, because she took his phone and typed her number into it. "Don't make me regret this," she said. He promised he wouldn't. And at the time, he meant it. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Paul had experienced. Sharon did not care about his money, did not care about his connections, did not care about the empire he was building or the reputation he was cultivating. She cared about who he was when no one was watching. And slowly, reluctantly, Paul began to show her. Their first date was at a tiny Vietnamese restaurant in Queens that Sharon had discovered years ago. The tables were plastic. The service was chaotic. The food was transcendent. "This is not what I expected," Paul admitted, looking around at the fluorescent lighting and laminated menus. "That's the point." Sharon passed him the appetizers she had ordered for both of them. Anyone can impress someone at a fancy restaurant. The test is whether you can enjoy yourself somewhere real. "And you're testing me?" "I'm always testing." She grinned. You should probably get used to it. He did get used to it. He got used to a lot of things. Late-night conversations on her fire escape, watching the city lights while she challenged every assumption he had ever made. Weekend, mornings in her tiny apartment, drinking coffee from mismatched mugs while she sketched designs for projects that did not exist yet. The way she laughed when he tried to cook dinner and failed spectacularly. She saw through him. Every mask he wore, every performance he delivered, she cut through it like it was made of paper. At first, this terrified him. Then it became the thing he craved most. You're different when you're with her, Richard observed one day at the office. More human. Paul did not know how to respond. More human suggested he had been something less before, and the uncomfortable truth was that Richard was probably right. 12 months into the relationship, Paul told Sharon he loved her. They were on her fire escape. The city was spread out below them like a promise of infinite possibility. I love you too, she said. And then she looked at him with those eyes that missed nothing. But I need you to understand something. I don't need you. I'm not with you because you're successful or wealthy or connected. I'm with you because, when you let yourself be real, you're the most interesting person I've ever met. The moment you start hiding from me, I'm gone. I won't hide from you, he promised. And at the time, he meant that too. Another year passed. They talked about the future, moving in together, eventually marriage, eventually children, eventually a life that combined their separate ambitions into something shared. Paul began to imagine it. A different kind of success, one measured in family dinners and shared jokes and the small daily intimacies that made life meaningful. But underneath his imagination, something else was growing. Fear. Sharon challenged him constantly. She called out his selfishness, his tendency toward control, his habit of treating people like variables in an equation. She pushed him to be better, and that pushing never stopped. Part of him was grateful. Part of him was exhausted. And there was another voice, a quiet, insidious voice that whispered dangerous things in the dark hours of the night. She sees too much. She expects too much. She will never let you rest. She will eventually discover that you are not worth the effort, and she will leave. Paul had been abandoned before. His father had walked out when he was 12. His mother had retreated into society functions and charity boards, present but unreachable. He had learned early that people leave, that depending on anyone was a vulnerability that could destroy you. Sharon was the first person he had depended on in decades, and the closer they got, the more the old fears screamed their warnings. Then Victoria arrived. Victoria Ashford appeared at a charity gala that Paul's firm sponsored. She was blonde and beautiful and easy in all the ways that Sharon was complex. She laughed at his jokes. She admired his success. She looked at him like he was already perfect rather than a work in progress. Nothing happened that night. Just conversation. Just the warmth of uncomplicated attention. But Paul went home to Sharon's questions, to her observations about how distant he had seemed lately, to her concern that felt like pressure, and he compared the woman who pushed him to be better with the woman who accepted him as he was. He compared transformation with comfort, growth with ease. The comparison was unfair. The comparison was cowardly. The comparison was the beginning of the end. Over the next 3 months, Paul created distance, worked later, traveled more, answered Sharon's questions with shorter and shorter responses. He told himself he needed space, told himself the relationship had run its course, told himself all the lies that cowards tell themselves when they are too afraid to face the truth. Sharon noticed everything. Of course she did. She always did. Something's wrong, she said one night when he came home at midnight claiming work emergency. You've been pulling away for weeks. Talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. We're fine. We're not fine. She sat up in bed, her face illuminated by the bedside lamp. Her expression was a mixture of fear and determination. I can feel you leaving, Paul. I don't know why, and I don't know what I did, but I can feel it. You're imagining things. Don't. Her voice cracked. Don't lie to me. Don't treat me like I'm stupid. Whatever is happening, we can work through it. But you have to talk to me. He should have talked to her. Should have admitted his fears. Should have let her help him face the broken parts of himself that whispered betrayal was easier than vulnerability. Instead, he said the words that would destroy everything. Maybe we've run our course, Sharon. Maybe this was never meant to be permanent. The look on her face would haunt him for years. The way hope collapsed into devastation. The way love transformed into grief right before his eyes. You don't mean that. I think I do. He was burning it down now, destroying the best thing he had ever had because he was too afraid to keep it. We want different things. You want transformation. I want stability. It's not going to work. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up and began gathering her things. Her movements were precise, controlled, the movements of someone holding themselves together through sheer force of will. If you want me to leave, I'll leave, she said. But I need you to know something first. I would have fought for this. For us, I would have done the work, whatever work was needed. But you have to want it too. And if you don't, she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence, unable to accept what was happening. I'm sorry, Paul said. And he was. He was sorry for being weak, for being afraid, for choosing destruction over difficulty. But being sorry wasn't enough to stop him. Sharon left that night. Paul told himself he was relieved, told himself it was better this way, told himself he had made the smart choice, the strategic choice, the choice that protected him from inevitable abandonment. 3 weeks later, he started dating Victoria. 2 weeks after that, Sharon called. I need to see you, she said. Her voice was strange, flat. I need to tell you something in person. They met at his office because he could not face meeting her somewhere that held memories. She looked different, tired, pale, something in her eyes that he could not identify. I'm pregnant, she said, without preamble. It's yours. There's no question. And Paul's entire carefully constructed justification collapsed into panic. We can get you through this process together, working with a certified doula and lactation consultant who takes insurance. Whatever you decide, Paul said, his voice calm even as his mind raced through exit strategies. Sharon stared at him. What do you mean, whatever I decide? I mean, he calculated his words carefully. We're not together anymore. We've discussed this. We're not compatible long-term. Not compatible long-term? She repeated his words like they were in a foreign language. We were compatible for 2 years. We talked about marriage, about children. And now I'm pregnant with your child, and we're not compatible? The timing is wrong, Paul said. I'm not ready for this. We're not ready for this. The timing is what it is. She was starting to understand now, starting to see what he was doing, and her face was transforming from confusion to horror. Paul, this is your baby. Our baby. You can't just decide you're not ready and make it go away. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, I don't believe this is mine. The words hung in the air. Ugly, inexcusable. The worst kind of cowardice dressed up as skepticism. Sharon's face went white. You don't believe me? We haven't been together in weeks. How do I know? How do you know? Her voice rose. After 2 years together, you think I was sleeping with someone else? You think I would lie about this? I think you're scared and looking for security. I think we should both move on. He reached for his checkbook. The ultimate insult. The final reduction of everything they had been to a transaction that could be settled with money. I can help financially, he said, writing a number that he thought was generous. Whatever you decide about the pregnancy, consider it handled. Sharon took the check, looked at it for a long moment. Her hands were trembling, but her voice was steady when she spoke. You know what's strange, Paul? I spent 2 years believing you were better than this. Believing that underneath the control and the calculation, there was someone worth loving. She tore the check in half, then in quarters, let the pieces fall like snow onto his mahogany desk. I don't want your money, she said. I wanted you to want this baby. I wanted you to want me. But I see now that I was wrong about who you are. Sharon, don't. She held up her hand. You made your choice. You made it weeks ago when you started pulling away. You made it again just now when you offered me a check instead of a partnership. So I'll make my choice too. I'm going to have this baby, and I'm going to raise her without you. She will never know your name. She will never feel the absence of a father who didn't want her. That's my gift to her. Protection from you. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle. Goodbye, Paul. I hope whatever you're looking for was worth what you threw away. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Final. Irreversible. Paul sat at his desk for a long time, staring at the torn pieces of checks scattered across the surface, telling himself he had done the right thing, the smart thing, The necessary thing. 3 weeks later, Victoria moved into his penthouse. 6 weeks after that, he heard through mutual acquaintances that Sharon had left New York, gone somewhere else to start over. He felt relief, then guilt about feeling relief, then busy enough with mergers and acquisitions to bury both emotions entirely. He never tried to find out if she had the baby, never investigated whether the child was really his, never did anything that might challenge the narrative he had constructed. It was easier that way, cleaner, more controlled, and for 5 years he believed he had made the right choice. Now we need to understand what happened on the other side of that closed door, what Sharon built from the ashes Paul left behind, because her story is not one of victimhood. It is a story of survival, of transformation, of becoming something stronger than the person who tried to break her. Sharon left Paul's office and walked 16 blocks before she allowed herself to cry. When the tears came, she found a bench in a small park and let them flow. Let herself feel the full weight of betrayal and loss, and the terrifying reality of facing the future alone. She had no family in New York. Her parents had passed away years ago. Her sister lived in California and had her own struggles. The friends she had made were mostly connected to Paul's world, to circles that would close around him once word spread of their breakup. She was alone, pregnant, and the father of her child had just looked her in the eye and called her a liar. The first week was the hardest. Sharon moved through her days like a ghost, going through the motions of work, coming home to an empty apartment, lying awake at night with her hand on her stomach, talking to a baby who could not hear her yet. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry your father is not who I thought he was. I'm sorry this is not the family I wanted to give you, but I promise you, I will never make you feel unwanted. I will never make you doubt that you are loved." On the 8th day, her best friend Elena showed up at her door. Elena was a force of nature, 5'2", Brazilian, and utterly incapable of accepting defeat. She had been Sharon's college roommate and business partner for their early design projects. When she heard what Paul had done, she booked a flight from Chicago without asking permission. "We're figuring this out," Elena said, pushing past Sharon into the apartment. "You're not doing this alone. I don't know what to do." Sharon's voice was small in a way it had never been before. "I don't know how to be a single mother and build a career, and one step at a time." Elena sat her down on the couch. "First we get you healthy, then we make a plan, then we execute the plan. That's how we've always worked. This is no different. This is completely different." "No," Elena's voice was firm. "This is just another design problem. You have resources. You have skills. You have constraints. We work within them and create something beautiful anyway." Sharon wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons this was impossible, but Elena's certainty was infectious. And somewhere beneath the grief and fear, a spark of determination began to glow. Over the next month, they made a plan. Sharon would leave New York. Too many memories. Too much risk of running into Paul. She would start over somewhere else. Build her design business from scratch. Create a life that did not depend on anyone but herself. Elena helped her research cities. Boston made sense. Growing design market. Affordable enough to start small. Far enough from Paul's world to feel safe. Sharon gave notice at her job. Sold most of her furniture. Packed her life into boxes that would fit in a small moving truck. The night before she left, she stood in her empty apartment and let herself feel everything one last time. The grief of losing Paul. The fear of what lay ahead. The strange, tentative hope of the life growing inside her. Then she closed the door and drove away from everything she had known. The first months in Boston were brutal. Sharon worked 3 jobs while pregnant. Morning shifts at a coffee shop, afternoon freelance design work, evening cleaning for a commercial company that did not ask too many questions. Her apartment was tiny, a studio that barely fit her bed and her desk. But it was hers, paid for with money she had earned. Not given, not borrowed, earned. When Grace was born, Sharon held her daughter for the first time and everything crystallized into perfect clarity. This tiny person with dark curly hair and gray eyes. This beautiful, impossible miracle that had arrived despite every obstacle. "She has his eyes," the nurse observed. "But she'll have my heart," Sharon said. "That's what matters." The early years of motherhood were exhausting in ways Sharon had never imagined. Sleepless nights with a colicky baby. The impossible juggle of working and parenting with no one to share. The load the loneliness of having no partner to celebrate the small miracles. The first smile, the first word, the first steps. She documented everything. Photos and videos and journal entries, not for Paul. She had no intention of ever sharing any of it with him. But for Grace, so that one day her daughter would know she had been loved completely from the very first moment. And slowly, painfully, Sharon began to build. She started her design business from her apartment, taking small projects, building a portfolio, learning to negotiate and market and manage finances, all while caring for an infant. The first client was a small restaurant owner who needed his space redesigned on a tiny budget. Sharon delivered something beautiful anyway. He referred her to a friend, who referred her to another friend. The network began to grow. By the time Grace was 2, Sharon had enough steady work to quit her other jobs. By 3, she had hired her first employee. By 4, she had opened a small office. By 5, Blackwell Design had 12 employees and was expanding to a second location. She had built an empire, not as large as Paul's, but entirely her own. And through all of it, Grace was her constant, her motivation, her reminder that survival was not just possible, but necessary. "Mama," Grace asked one night at bedtime, "why don't I have a daddy?" Sharon had prepared for this question, had practiced answers in the mirror, but nothing prepared her for the way it felt to hear her daughter ask. "Some people aren't ready to be parents," she said, choosing her words carefully. "It's not about you, sweetheart. It's about them. And sometimes, when someone isn't ready, it's better for them to not be there than to be there badly. But all my friends have daddies. All families are different. We have each other, and we have Elena, and we have everyone who loves us. That's our family." Grace considered this with the seriousness that children bring to important questions. Then she nodded. "I think our family is good," she said. "Even if it's small." "I think so too, baby." Sharon kissed her daughter goodnight and walked to the window of their new apartment, the one with 2 bedrooms and a view of the city they had made their home. She thought about Paul sometimes, not with longing, not anymore, but with a strange kind of gratitude, because his abandonment had forced her to become stronger than she ever knew she could be. His cruelty had taught her that she could survive anything. His denial had given her the freedom to build a life completely on her own terms. She did not forgive him. She might never forgive him, but she had stopped letting his choices define her. That was enough. That was everything. And then, 5 years after walking out of his office, she walked into a restaurant in Manhattan and found him sitting there, celebrating his engagement to someone else, living the life he had chosen when he threw her away. For a moment, just a moment, the old anger flared. The old pain surfaced. The old wounds opened. But then Grace tugged at her hand, hungry, impatient, completely unaware of the history swirling around her, and Sharon remembered who she had become. Not a victim, not a scorned woman, a successful entrepreneur, a devoted mother, a survivor. She could handle this. She could handle anything. What she did not expect was for Paul to follow her, to sit at her table, to look at their daughter with something that might have been recognition or might have been regret. What she did not expect was the conversation that would follow, the possibilities it would open, the questions it would raise, questions that would take months to answer, and choices that would determine whether the destruction of the past could ever transform into something new. Now we return to the present, to the aftermath of that restaurant dinner, to Paul Westbrook standing alone on a Manhattan sidewalk, holding a business card that might be his last chance at redemption. He did not go home that night. Not to the penthouse where Amanda's things still occupied half the closets. Not to the life he had so carefully constructed and so thoroughly destroyed. Instead, he walked through Central Park, past the gallery in Soho, where he had met Sharon a lifetime ago, down streets that held memories he had tried to forget. The city that never sleeps watched him wander through his own wreckage. The man who had everything. The man who had nothing that mattered. Around 3 a.m, he found a bench overlooking the East River. The same kind of bench where Sharon had cried after leaving his office 5 years ago, where she had made the decision to survive without him. Paul sat down and let himself feel everything he had spent years avoiding, the grief of losing Sharon, not fresh anymore, but deep, the kind of grief that settles into bone, the shock of seeing Grace, his daughter, his child, the most important person he had ever created, and she did not know his name. The shame of who he had been. The coward who chose easy over meaningful. The liar who denied the truth because it was inconvenient. The terror of what came next, because Sharon's words echoed in his mind. If you start this and walk away again, you'll destroy that little girl, and I will never forgive you. He could not walk away again. He understood that now, not because of guilt or obligation or some desperate need for redemption, but because Grace existed, because she had his eyes and Sharon's stubbornness and a purple horse with wings, because she was real, and she deserved a father who showed up. But showing up was not something he had ever learned to do. His own father had taught him absence. His mother had taught him distance. His entire life had been built on the foundation of protecting himself from the pain of connection. How did someone like him learn to be present? He did not have answers. He only had a business card and a number to call on Monday. So he sat on that bench until sunrise, watching the city wake up around him, letting the questions settle, letting the fear transform into something that might eventually become courage. On Monday, he would call Sharon. On Monday, everything would begin again. We have reached the turning point of this story, the moment where Paul has to decide whether his words will become actions. But here is what I want to know from you. Do you believe him? Do you think a man who denied his own child can truly change? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. And if you are invested in seeing whether Paul can earn his redemption, hit that like button. It helps more people find stories like this one. Now let us see if Paul Westbrook can become the man he should have been all along. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. Paul had spent the weekend alone in his penthouse, surrounded by Amanda's abandoned belongings and the echoes of a life that no longer existed. He had not slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Grace's face. Those familiar eyes looking at him, without recognition, the casual dismissal of a child who had no reason to care about a stranger. "Can we eat now, Mama?" His daughter had looked at him and seen nothing worth noting. Just another adult interrupting her dinner. The thought was unbearable, and it was exactly what he deserved. At 9 o'clock he picked up his phone, stared at Sharon's business card, put the phone down, picked it up again. This was ridiculous. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals. He had faced hostile boardrooms and aggressive competitors. He was not afraid of a phone call, except he was, because this phone call mattered in a way that nothing else ever had. Finally, at 9:15, he dialed the number. "Blackwell Design, how may I direct your call?" The voice was professional, unfamiliar, a gatekeeper protecting Sharon from exactly the kind of call he was making. "I need to speak with Sharon Blackwell. My name is Paul Westbrook." A pause. He could almost hear the receptionist cross-referencing his name against some list. Some protocol Sharon had established. "One moment, please." Hold music. Classical. Tasteful. The kind of details Sharon would have chosen herself. Then her voice. "Paul, Sharon, I wasn't sure you'd take my call. I said I would." Another pause. "I assume you've had time to process what happened Friday night." "I haven't processed anything. I've just been sitting with it, trying to understand what to do next." That's probably the healthiest response you could have had. Silence stretched between them. 5 years of absence and pain and unanswered questions. All of it compressed into a phone line connecting Manhattan to Boston. "I want to know her," Paul said. "I want to be in her life. Whatever that looks like. Whatever you'll allow. What do you think that looks like?" "I don't know." He admitted his ignorance because it was the only honest thing he could offer. "I've never done this before. I've never been a father. I don't know what she needs or how to give it to her or whether I'm capable of being anything other than what I've always been." That's surprisingly self-aware. "I've had all weekend to think about nothing else." Sharon was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had softened slightly. "What happened with Amanda?" "She left. The engagement is over. I'm sorry if I caused—" "You didn't cause anything. The truth caused it. I'm actually grateful in a strange way. I was about to marry someone without knowing who I really was. Now I have to figure that out." More silence. Then Sharon said something he did not expect. "That's surprisingly mature of you." "I've had to grow up quickly in the past 72 hours. He could almost hear her evaluating, weighing his words against his history, looking for signs of the coward she had known versus the man he claimed to want to become. "If we do this," she said finally, "and I mean if, there are rules, non-negotiable rules. I'm listening. Grace is my priority. Not your feelings, not your guilt, not your need for redemption. Her well-being comes first, always and forever. Understood? This will take time. Months, maybe years. We start with you meeting me, proving you're stable. Then we introduce you to Grace as a friend. Eventually, gradually, carefully, we tell her the truth. But only when I believe you've earned that right. I understand. If at any point I feel you're becoming a negative influence, that you're falling back into old patterns, that you're going to hurt her, I will cut you off without hesitation. No appeals, no second chances. This is her one life, and I will protect it with everything I have. I would expect nothing less. Sharon let out a breath, as if she had been bracing for a fight and found herself surprised by surrender. I need to think about this, she said. I need to talk to Elena. I need to make sure I'm not making a decision based on emotion rather than Grace's best interest. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. The words hung between them, weighted with irony. He had spent 5 years going away. Now he was promising to stay. I'll call you later this week, Sharon said. We can discuss next steps. Thank you for even considering this. Don't thank me yet. I haven't agreed to anything except a conversation. I know, but the conversation is more than I deserve. So thank you. She hung up without saying goodbye. Paul sat holding the phone, staring at the contact information on her business card, feeling something he had not felt in years. Hope. It was a fragile thing, unearned, possibly misguided, but it was there. A small flame in the darkness he had created. He did not know if he could change, did not know if the man he had been could transform into the father Grace deserved. But he was going to try. For the first time in his life, he was going to try. The call from Sharon came on Thursday evening. Paul was in his office, staring at spreadsheets he could not focus on, when his phone lit up with her name. We can try, she said without preamble. But we start slow, glacially slow. You come to Boston. You meet with me first, alone, multiple times. We talk. I assess. If I'm satisfied that you're genuine, we introduce you to Grace as a friend. Nothing more. Not yet. Whatever you need. I need you to understand something, Paul. This isn't about giving you a chance. This is about determining whether you're safe for my daughter, whether your presence in her life will help her or hurt her. I'm not rooting for you. I'm evaluating you. I understand. Do you? Because 5 years ago you looked me in the eye and called me a liar. You offered me a check to make our baby go away. You chose another woman over your own child. That's who you were. I need to see evidence that you're someone different now. Paul absorbed the weight of her words, the truth of them, the justice of them. I was that person, he said. I can't pretend otherwise. All I can do is show you who I'm trying to become. Trying isn't enough. Being is what matters. Then let me be. Give me the opportunity to demonstrate through actions, not words. That's all I'm asking. Sharon was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its edge. There's a coffee shop near my office. Beantown Brews on Newbury Street. Saturday at 10. Come alone. Don't bring gifts. Don't try to impress me. Just show up and be honest. I'll be there. And Paul? Don't be late. Grace has taught me that reliability is the most basic form of respect. If you can't show up on time for coffee, you can't show up for a child. I won't be late. She hung up. Paul immediately booked a flight to Boston for Friday evening. He would arrive the night before, stay in a hotel, and be at that coffee shop by 9:30 at the latest. He could not afford to fail this first test. He could not afford to fail any of them. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear. Paul had slept poorly, running through conversations in his head, anticipating questions Sharon might ask, preparing answers that felt honest without sounding rehearsed. He arrived at Beantown Brews at 9:45, ordered a black coffee, sat at a table near the window where Sharon would see him immediately when she walked in. At exactly 10 o'clock, she appeared. She looked different in Boston, more relaxed somehow, despite the tension of the situation. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair down around her shoulders instead of pulled back professionally. This was Sharon on her own territory. Comfortable, confident, in control. You're early, she observed, sitting across from him. You said reliability matters. It does. She ordered her own coffee, waited until the server left, then studied him with those evaluating eyes. So, where do we start? Wherever you want. Sharon took a breath, let it out slowly. Okay, tell me about the last 5 years. What happened with Victoria? What happened with your company? What happened with you? Paul had expected this question. He answered honestly. Victoria lasted 2 years. She was easy and uncomplicated and exactly what I thought I wanted after us. We moved in together quickly, got engaged after a year. The wedding was planned, the venue booked, the invitations printed. What happened? I woke up one morning and realized I felt nothing. Not love, not even contentment, just emptiness. The relationship was comfortable, but it wasn't real. Victoria didn't challenge me, didn't push me, didn't see past the surface to anything deeper. And I realized that was exactly why I'd chosen her, because she let me stay exactly as I was. So, you left. I ended it. Badly, I'm sure. Victoria deserved better than someone who was only with her because she was easy. I hurt her by staying as long as I did. Sharon's expression remained neutral. And after that, I threw myself into work, built the company bigger, made more money, acquired more companies, filled every hour with activity so I wouldn't have to think about what I'd lost, what I'd thrown away. Did it work? No. I was successful by every metric that society uses to measure success. But I was alone, profoundly, fundamentally alone. The few relationships I attempted never lasted more than a few months. I couldn't let anyone in, couldn't be vulnerable, couldn't risk caring about someone who might eventually leave. Sharon took a sip of her coffee. And Amanda? Amanda was different. She didn't want vulnerability, she wanted partnership. A merger of 2 successful people into one powerful couple. It made sense on paper, made sense strategically. I told myself that was enough, but it wasn't. No, it wasn't. And seeing you at that restaurant, seeing Grace, made me realize that I'd been lying to myself for 5 years, pretending that the life I'd chosen was satisfying when really it was just safe, pretending that I didn't think about you, about what we had, about what I destroyed. Sharon set down her coffee cup. Her hands were steady, but something in her eyes had shifted. I thought about you too, she said quietly, not romantically. That door closed a long time ago. But I wondered sometimes what would have happened if you'd been different. If you'd been the man I thought you were instead of the man you turned out to be. I wasn't that man. You were right about who I was. I was a coward who chose easy over meaningful. And who are you now? I don't know. Paul heard the uncertainty in his own voice and did not try to hide it. I'm someone who saw his daughter for the first time 3 days ago and realized that nothing else matters. I'm someone who is terrified of this conversation because I know I have no right to ask for what I'm asking. I'm someone who is finally willing to admit that he has no idea how to be a father, but wants to learn anyway. Why should I believe you? Because I have nothing to gain by lying. Amanda is gone. My reputation will take a hit when this becomes public. I'm not here because it's convenient or strategic. I'm here because I looked into Grace's eyes and saw myself, and I can't unknow that. I can't go back to pretending she doesn't exist. Sharon was quiet for a long moment, processing, evaluating, weighing his words against his history. Tell me about your childhood, she said finally. My childhood? I need to understand why you are the way you are, why you chose to run instead of fight, why abandonment was easier than commitment. Paul felt the familiar walls rising, the instinct to deflect, to minimize, to protect himself from examination. But he had promised honesty, and this was the first test. My father left when I was 12, he said. No warning, no explanation. One day he was there, the next day he was gone. My mother told me he'd found someone else, started a new family somewhere in California. I never heard from him again. That must have been devastating. It was, but what was worse was how my mother handled it. She didn't collapse or rage or grieve openly. She just became distant, present, but unreachable. She threw herself into society functions and charity boards and everything that kept her busy and away from home. I learned that people leave, that depending on anyone was dangerous, that the only way to protect yourself was to never fully commit. And that's why you left me before I could leave you. Paul nodded. I convinced myself it was inevitable, that eventually you would see through me and realize I wasn't worth the effort. So I accelerated the timeline, chose Victoria because she didn't challenge me, denied Grace because accepting her meant accepting vulnerability I wasn't ready for. Sharon's expression had softened slightly, not with forgiveness, but with understanding. "I appreciate you telling me that," she said. "It doesn't excuse what you did, but it helps me understand it. Understanding doesn't mean you should trust me. No, it doesn't." She finished her coffee. "But it's a starting point. I'm willing to continue these conversations, to give you the opportunity to demonstrate through actions. But Paul, I need you to understand something. Grace is happy. She's thriving. She has a good life, a stable home, people who love her. She doesn't need you. If you become part of her life, it has to be because you're adding something positive, not because you're filling some hole in her existence that doesn't actually exist." "I understand. Do you? Because a lot of absent fathers think their children are desperate for them, think that showing up will be some magical reunion that instantly makes everything right. That's not how it works. Grace might not want you. She might not care. She might be perfectly content with the family she already has. I know. And if that's the case, I'll respect it. I'm not here to force myself on her. I'm here to offer something she can accept or reject on her own terms." Sharon studied him for another long moment. Then she nodded once. "Same place. Next Saturday. We'll keep talking." Paul felt relief wash through him. Not victory, just the knowledge that he had passed the first test. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me. We haven't accomplished anything yet. This is just the beginning." She left before he did, walking out into the Boston morning with the confidence of someone who owned her life completely. Paul sat at the table for another hour, drinking coffee he did not taste, replaying the conversation in his mind. He had a long way to go. He understood that now. But the door was open, if only a crack. The weeks that followed established a rhythm. Every Saturday, Paul flew to Boston. Every Saturday, he met Sharon at the coffee shop. Every Saturday, they talked. The conversations were not always easy. Sharon asked hard questions about his therapy, about his plans for the future, about how he intended to balance fatherhood with his demanding career, about what would happen when the novelty wore off and the work got hard. Paul answered as honestly as he could. He had started seeing a therapist in New York, working through the childhood abandonment issues that had shaped his adult choices. He was restructuring his company to delegate more responsibility. He was considering opening a satellite office in Boston, though he had not finalized those plans yet. Sharon listened, evaluated, occasionally pushed back when his answers seemed too convenient or too rehearsed. By the fourth meeting, something had shifted between them. Not romance, not even friendship exactly, but a mutual respect that had not existed when they were together. Sharon had become someone formidable in the years since he had known her, and Paul had become someone capable of recognizing it. "You're different than I remember," she observed during their fifth conversation. "Different how?" "More honest, less polished. The Paul I knew always had perfect answers ready. You seem to be actually thinking now instead of performing. I learned that performing doesn't get you anywhere that matters. That's a good lesson." Sharon paused. "I think I'm ready to introduce you to Grace." Paul felt his heart stutter. "Really? As a friend? Someone I knew a long time ago who's moving to Boston and wants to meet some people. We'll see how she responds to you, how you respond to her. If it goes well, we can schedule more interactions. Whatever you think is best. Saturday, we're going to the park near my apartment. Be there at 2. Casual clothes. No gifts. Don't try too hard. I won't. And Paul, remember that she's 5. She's not interested in adult conversation or impressive accomplishments. She likes purple horses and butterflies and pasta. Meet her where she is. I'll do my best." The park was small and sunny, with a playground that looked well used and well loved. Paul arrived at 1:45, early enough to settle his nerves before Sharon and Grace appeared. He watched children play on swings and slides, watched parents push strollers and chase toddlers, watched the ordinary miracle of family happening all around him. At 2:00 exactly, Sharon appeared with Grace. His daughter was wearing purple overalls and a striped shirt. Her curly hair bounced as she skipped along beside her mother. She was talking animatedly about something, her small hands gesturing to emphasize whatever point she was making. Paul stood. His hands were trembling slightly. He shoved them in his pockets to hide it. "Grace, this is Paul," Sharon said as they approached. "Remember I told you about him? He's an old friend of Mama's, and he just moved to Boston." Grace looked up at him with those gray eyes. His eyes. assessing him with the unfiltered judgment of childhood. "Hi," she said. "Hi, Grace. Your mom tells me you like the playground here. I like the swings best." Grace pointed toward the swing set. "Will you push me? Mama always pushes too soft." Sharon hid a smile. "I push perfectly appropriately for safety reasons." "Boring," Grace declared. She looked at Paul expectantly. "Will you push me higher?" Paul glanced at Sharon, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "I can try," he said, "but I have to warn you, I've never pushed someone on a swing before. You might have to teach me." Grace considered this. "Okay, I'm a good teacher. Mama says so." She grabbed his hand, casual as breathing, and pulled him toward the swings. Paul felt the small fingers wrapped around his, and something cracked open in his chest. This was his daughter. This was what he had missed for 5 years. This was what he had almost lost forever. He helped her onto the swing and began pushing, gently at first, then harder as Grace demanded. "Higher, higher." Paul pushed higher. Grace's laughter rang out across the playground, pure and delighted. He found himself laughing too. Sharon watched from a nearby bench. Her expression was unreadable, but she did not intervene. The afternoon passed in a blur of swings and slides and the elaborate games that 5-year-olds invent on the spot. Grace appointed Paul as the guardian of her invisible castle, which apparently required him to make specific growling sounds whenever enemy dragons approached. He growled on command. He guarded the castle with complete seriousness. He followed Grace's increasingly complicated instructions without question. By the time they left the park, Grace was holding his hand again. "You're good at playing," she informed him. "Most adults are bad at it." "I had a good teacher," Paul replied. "That's true. I am good." Grace looked up at Sharon. "Can Paul come to dinner? I want to show him my dragon collection." Sharon hesitated, only for a moment, but Paul saw it. "Maybe another time, sweetheart. Paul has things to do tonight." "No, I don't," Grace countered with the relentless logic of children. "He was playing with us all day. That means he's not busy." Paul looked at Sharon, letting her make the call. "Just for an hour," Sharon conceded. "And you have to clean up your room first." Grace cheered and ran ahead toward their apartment building. Sharon fell into step beside Paul. "You did well," she said quietly. "She likes you." "She's amazing," Paul replied. He felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "I can't believe I almost missed all of this." "You did miss all of this. What you're seeing now is 5 years of work. 5 years of building her confidence and her creativity and her trust in the world. That's what you're inheriting." "I know. And I'm grateful." They reached the apartment. Grace's room was chaos made colorful. Purple dominated everything. Dragons of various sizes and materials covered every surface. Drawings wallpapered the walls. "This is Queen Dragonfire," Grace announced, holding up a plush purple dragon. "She's the leader. She protects everyone from bad guys. She sounds very important." "She is." Grace handed him the dragon. "You can hold her, but be careful. She's very old. I've had her since I was a baby." Paul held the dragon with the reverence it deserved. A stuffed animal that had been his daughter's constant companion through years he had not witnessed. "She's beautiful," he said. "I know." Grace took the dragon back and placed it carefully on her bed. "Mama says you and her used to be friends a long time ago." "We were. Why did you stop being friends?" Paul looked at Sharon, who stood in the doorway. Her expression gave him no guidance. This was his test. "Sometimes adults make mistakes," he said carefully. "We hurt each other's feelings. We stopped talking. It was sad, and I wished it had happened differently." "Did you say sorry?" "Eventually. It took me a long time to understand what I had done wrong." Grace nodded sagely. "That happens. Sometimes I get mad at Mama and don't say sorry for a whole day. But then I feel bad, and I say it, and we hug." "Did you and Mama hug?" "Not yet. We're still figuring things out." "You should hug," Grace advised. "It always makes things better." From the doorway, Sharon made a soft sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been something else entirely. Dinner was simple. Pasta, at Grace's insistence. Paul helped set the table while Grace supervised from her chair, offering commentary on where everything should go. "The forks go on the left," she instructed. "Mama taught me that." "Did she?" "She teaches me everything." Grace beamed at her mother. "She's the smartest person in the whole world." Paul looked at Sharon, who was draining pasta at the stove. She is, he agreed. Your mama is extraordinary. Something flickered in Sharon's expression, something old and complicated and quickly suppressed. Dinner is ready, she announced. Let's eat. They ate together. Grace dominated the conversation with stories about school and friends and the elaborate fantasy world she had constructed involving purple dragons and flying horses and a kingdom where everyone was nice to each other. Paul listened to every word, asked questions, engaged with the stories like they were the most important narratives he had ever heard. Because they were. This was his daughter's interior world, the imagination that had developed entirely without him, the personality that had formed while he was building an empire that suddenly seemed meaningless by comparison. After dinner, Grace showed him more dragons, then her drawings, then the book she was learning to read by herself. Finally, Sharon intervened. It's getting late, sweetheart. Time for Paul to go home, but I want to show him more things. You can show him next time. There's going to be a next time? Grace's face lit up. Sharon looked at Paul. He held her gaze, trying to convey all the things he could not say in front of Grace. Yes, Sharon said. There will be a next time. Grace hugged Paul goodbye, wrapped her small arms around his legs and squeezed. See you soon, she said. See you soon, Grace. He walked out of the apartment and made it to the elevator before the tears came. 5 years of numbness breaking open all at once. 5 years of pretending he didn't have a daughter catching up with him in a single moment. He had missed so much. First words, first steps, first days of school, 5 birthdays, 5 Christmases, 5 years of bedtime stories and playground adventures and purple dragon collections. But he was here now, and if Sharon would let him, he would not miss any more. The months that followed were the hardest and most rewarding of Paul's life. He flew to Boston every other week, met Sharon for coffee, spent time with Grace at parks and museums and her favorite pasta restaurant, built a relationship slowly, carefully, with the patience of someone who understood the stakes. Grace warmed to him quickly. She was generous with her affection, trusting by nature, eager to include this new adult in her world. Mama, can Paul come to my school play? She asked one evening, about 3 months into the arrangement. Sharon looked at Paul. He saw the calculation in her eyes. The school play meant being seen by other parents, by teachers, by people who would ask questions. If he wants to, she said finally. I want to, Paul confirmed immediately. I wouldn't miss it. Grace beamed. You have to sit in the front row. That's where Mama and Elena always sit. I'll be there. He was there. Front row, as promised. Watching his daughter play a tree in a production about environmental conservation, she had 3 lines and delivered them with the dramatic intensity of someone performing Shakespeare. When she took her bow, she looked directly at Paul and waved. Something in his chest swelled until he thought it might burst. Afterward, he met her backstage with flowers Sharon had helped him select. Purple, of course. Grace threw her arms around him with the abandon of a child who trusted completely. Did you see me? Did you see when I said my lines? I saw everything. You were magnificent. I know. She accepted the flowers with queenly grace. Thank you for coming. I'll always come. Paul heard the promise in his own voice and meant it. Whenever you want me there, I'll be there. Grace looked at him with those gray eyes that missed nothing. You're nice, she declared. I'm glad you're Mama's friend. I'm glad too. The introduction to Elena happened around month 4. Sharon's best friend and business partner had been skeptical from the beginning, and she made no effort to hide it. So you're the guy, Elena said when they finally met. The one who broke my best friend and denied his own child. That's accurate, Paul replied. He had learned not to defend himself, not to offer excuses. I was a coward. I'm trying to be better. Elena studied him for a long moment. She was small but fierce, and her protectiveness of Sharon was palpable. Sharon says you've been consistent, she allowed. Says you show up when you say you will. That you're good with Grace. I try. Trying isn't enough. You know that, right? I know. And yet here you are. Still trying. Here I am. Elena's expression softened slightly. She says you've changed. That you're not the same person who walked away 5 years ago. I'd like to believe that's true. So would I. Because Grace loves you. And if you break her heart, I will personally make your life miserable in ways you cannot imagine. I believe you. Good. Elena extended her hand. Welcome to Boston, Paul. Don't make me regret tolerating your existence. He shook her hand. I'll do my best. 6 months after that first dinner at La Maison d'Or, Paul made the decision to restructure his company. The announcement made headlines. Billionaire CEO steps back from empire. Industry analysts speculated about health problems or personal scandals. None of them guessed the truth. That Paul Westbrook was choosing fatherhood over finance, presence over profit, the life he should have had over the empire he had built as a substitute for living. He opened a Boston office, small at first, just enough to justify spending most of his time in the city where his daughter lived. He bought a brownstone 3 blocks from Sharon's apartment, close enough to be present, far enough to respect boundaries. Grace helped him choose the paint colors for her room. Purple, obviously, with silver stars on the ceiling because you wanted to see constellations when she slept over. This is my room, she announced when the decorating was complete. Mine and Queen Dragonfire's. Yours and Queen Dragonfire's, Paul agreed. Will I sleep here a lot? As often as your mom says is okay. Grace nodded seriously. I'll ask her. She usually says yes when I ask nicely. And then came the setback, the moment when Paul's old life and new life collided in ways that forced a choice. It was a Tuesday in October. Paul was in Boston, working from his satellite office, when the call came. A hostile takeover attempt on one of his company's most profitable divisions. Investors panicking. Board members demanding his immediate presence in New York. I need you here, his CEO insisted. Today, right now. This cannot be handled remotely. I understand, Paul replied, but I'm in Boston. My daughter has a recital tonight. I promised I would be there. A recital? Paul, we're talking about a $200 million division. Your daughter's recital can wait. No, it can't. Silence on the line. The kind of silence that carried judgment and confusion in equal measure. I'll handle what I can from here, Paul continued. Video conference, phone calls, whatever you need. But I'm not leaving Boston tonight. This is a mistake, maybe, but it's my mistake to make. He hung up, opened his laptop, began the process of managing a crisis from 1,000 miles away. The video conferences were chaotic. The phone calls were constant. 3 different investors threatened to pull their money. 2 board members called his judgment into question. Paul handled it all from his car in the parking lot of Grace's school, taking calls between the acts of her dance recital, responding to emails during intermission. It was imperfect, messy, not the level of control he usually demanded of himself. But when Grace took the stage for her solo, Paul was in the front row. His phone was silenced. His attention was complete. She danced, not perfectly. She was 5. She stumbled twice and lost count of the music once, but she danced with the joy of someone who had never been told she was not good enough. And when she finished, she searched the audience for him, found his face, waved. He waved back, tears streaming down his cheeks, not caring who saw. After the recital, Grace ran to him in her sparkly costume. Did you see me? Did you see my turns? I saw everything. You were beautiful. I messed up once. I forgot the steps. Nobody noticed. You were perfect. Grace beamed. She believed him because he meant it. Sharon approached, having watched the interaction from a few feet away. I heard your phone buzzing all night, she observed quietly. Something happening at work? Nothing that matters. Sharon studied him, looking for cracks, for signs of resentment or regret. You chose to be here, she said, even though something big was happening. Yes. Why? Because I promised. Paul met her eyes. And because there will always be something big happening at work, deals and crises and demands that feel urgent. But Grace is only 5 once. This recital is only tonight. I can't get these moments back. I already missed 5 years. I'm not missing anymore. Something shifted in Sharon's expression, something that looked almost like trust. That's the right answer, she said softly. It's not an answer. It's the truth. The fallout at work was significant. Some investors pulled out. 2 board members resigned. Industry analysis questioned whether Paul Westbrook had lost his edge. Paul did not care. He had found something more important than his edge, something more valuable than any $200 million division. He had found his daughter, and he was not letting go. The day they told Grace, the truth arrived 14 months after that dinner at La Maison d'Or. Paul and Sharon had discussed it extensively, consulted with a child psychologist, prepared for every possible reaction. They did it together, in Sharon's living room, on a Saturday afternoon when there was no rush, no pressure, no reason for Grace to feel overwhelmed. "Sweetheart," Sharon began, "we need to tell you something important." Grace looked between them. Her small face was serious, sensing the weight of the moment. "Am I in trouble?" "No, baby. Not at all. This is something good. We hope." Sharon took a breath. Paul saw her hands trembling slightly. "You know how you've asked about your father sometimes? About why you don't have a daddy like some of your friends do?" Grace nodded. "You said sometimes people aren't ready to be parents. That's true. And I want you to know that the person who wasn't ready has become ready now. He's learned and grown and changed. And he wants to be your daddy if you'll let him." Grace's brow furrowed. Her eyes moved to Paul. "Is it you?" Paul felt his heart stop. "Yes, you're my dad." "Yes, Grace, I'm your father." Silence, long and heavy. Grace processing information that would reshape her entire understanding of her life. "Why did you leave?" Her voice was small, hurt in a way that no 5-year-old should ever sound. "Were you scared of me?" "No." Paul moved to kneel in front of her, bringing himself to her level. "I was scared of myself. I didn't think I could be a good father. I thought I would mess it up and hurt you. So I stayed away instead." "That's dumb." "You're right. It was very dumb. Mama is the best mom in the whole world. Did you know that?" "I do know that. Your mama is extraordinary. So why couldn't you stay and help her?" The question cut to the core of everything. Simple and devastating and impossible to answer without honesty. "Because I was broken," Paul said. "Not in a way you could see. But inside, I was scared of being close to people. Scared of being loved. Scared of not being good enough. So when your mama told me about you, instead of being happy, I was terrified. And I ran away." "That's sad," Grace said. "For you, I mean. It was. It still is. But then I met you, and I realized I didn't want to be broken anymore. I wanted to be your dad. I wanted to learn how." Grace was quiet for a long moment. Her gray eyes studied him with an intensity that reminded him of Sharon. Evaluating. Deciding. "Do you love me? More than anything. Do you promise never to leave again?" "I promise." Paul felt tears streaming down his face and did not try to hide them. "I will never leave again. No matter what happens. I will be here. Always." Grace considered this. Then she climbed off the couch and stood in front of him. "Okay," she said. "You can be my dad." She hugged him, small arms wrapped around his neck, her curly hair tickling his face. "But you have to keep being nice," she added. "And you have to learn to braid hair. Mama's tired of doing it alone." Paul laughed through his tears. "I'll learn. I promise. And you have to tell me you love me, but only when you mean it. I love you, Grace. I mean it." She pulled back and looked at him with those eyes that saw everything. "I love you too, Dad." The word broke him open. Dad. His daughter had called him Dad. He looked at Sharon, who was crying silently on the couch. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Gratitude, relief, the beginning of healing. They were not a family yet, not in the traditional sense, but they were building something. Slowly, carefully, with intention. And for the first time in his life, Paul Westbrook understood what actually mattered. Now we come to the present, a year and a half after that dinner at La Maison d'Or. 18 months of transformation, 18 months of becoming someone new. Paul Westbrook is no longer the man who denied his child. That man exists only in history, in lessons learned, in the determination never to repeat old mistakes. The new Paul lives in Boston, 3 blocks from his daughter, present for school plays and recitals and ordinary Tuesday dinners that had become the highlight of his week. He has restructured his company, delegated responsibilities, built a life that prioritizes presence over profit. Grace calls him Dad now. Naturally, without hesitation, like he has always been there. But that is not the end of this story, because redemption is not a destination. It is a daily practice, a constant choice. Before we go any further, I need to pause and speak directly to you. We have come so far together, from that first shocking moment in the restaurant to this place of healing and hope. You have watched Paul transform from a coward into a father. You have watched Sharon evolve from victim to architect of her own forgiveness. You have watched Grace welcome a parent who once denied her existence. If this story has meant something to you, if you believe in the power of second chances and the possibility of genuine change, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to believe that it is never too late to become better. Drop a comment telling me your thoughts. Do you think Paul deserved his redemption? Have you ever been in Sharon's position? Have you ever had to decide whether to forgive someone who hurt you deeply? Your engagement matters to me. Your perspective shapes this community we are building together. And if you have not subscribed yet, hit that button right now. Turn on notifications. Because here at Mr. Dalton Storyhouse, we tell the stories that matter. The messy, complicated, real stories about love and loss and the hard work of becoming who we are supposed to be. Now let me tell you how this story ends. Though in truth, it does not end at all. It simply transforms into something new. The gala was Sharon's biggest achievement yet. Blackwell Design was expanding. The company she had built from nothing now had offices in 3 cities, employed over 20 people, and had just landed a contract to design a luxury hotel chain's entire rebranding. The celebration was held in Boston, a beautiful venue that Sharon herself had designed years earlier. Industry leaders and potential clients filled the space, all there to celebrate the success of a woman who had turned devastation into triumph. Paul stood in the corner watching Grace charm a group of investors with stories about her purple dragon kingdom. His daughter had inherited Sharon's charisma and his own stubbornness. She could hold a room at 6 years old. She's something else, a voice said beside him. He turned to find Sharon, elegant in a black dress that spoke of confidence rather than ostentation. She is, Paul agreed. Gets it from her mother. Sharon smiled slightly. Some of it comes from you, too. That stubborn determination, the way she refuses to accept limitations. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Sharon stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. She's happy. I know. Are you? Paul considered the question. Really considered it. Yes, he said finally. For the first time in as long as I can remember, I'm happy. Not because everything is perfect, but because I'm present for it. Whatever it is. Sharon was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke again. I've been thinking about what happens next. What do you mean? Grace has a father now. A good one. That was the goal, and we've achieved it. But I keep wondering whether that's all this is. A co-parenting arrangement that ends when the logistical questions are settled. Paul turned to face her. His heart was beating faster than it had during any business negotiation. What do you want it to be? I don't know. Sharon met his eyes. For 5 years I told myself I was content. I had my work and Grace and the life I'd built. I didn't need anything else. I didn't need anyone else. And now? Now I'm starting to wonder if contentment is the same as happiness. Or if I've been settling for less than I deserve because I was afraid of being hurt again. Paul reached for her hand. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. I spent 5 years learning how to be alone, he said. How to fill silence with work and achievement, and the appearance of success. I was very good at it. I convinced myself it was enough. And now I know it wasn't. None of it meant anything because I wasn't sharing it with the people who mattered. He squeezed her hand gently. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he continued. I'm not asking for a second chance at the relationship we had. That's gone. We're different people now. But maybe those different people could build something new, something that isn't based on who we were but who we've become. Sharon's eyes glistened. For a woman who had perfected emotional control, the tears were significant. I'm scared, she admitted, of trusting you again, of letting you in and watching you walk away. I know. I'm scared too. Scared of messing this up. Scared of not being good enough. But I'm more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been if I'd had the courage to try. Across the room, Grace had noticed them holding hands. Her face split into a knowing grin. Finally, she declared loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. I knew it would happen eventually. Sharon laughed. A genuine, surprised laugh that broke the tension. She's been waiting for this, she said. Apparently, Elena told me she asked her last week when we were going to start dating like normal parents. What did Elena say? Elena said it was complicated. Grace said that complicated usually means yes, but adults don't want to admit it. Paul laughed too. She's probably right. She usually is. They stood together, watching their daughter hold court across the room, watching the life they had built separately begin to merge into something shared. I can't promise I won't hurt you, Paul said quietly. I can't promise I'll always get it right, but I can promise that I'll show up every day, through the difficult parts and the boring parts and the parts where we want to give up. I'll show up. Sharon turned to face him fully. That's the only promise that matters, she said. So where do we go from here? Slowly, the way we've done everything else. Dinner first, then maybe more dinners. Let Grace adjust. Let ourselves adjust. Build something real instead of rushing into something fragile. I can do slow. Can you? Sharon's eyebrow raised skeptically. The Paul I knew didn't do anything slowly. The Paul you knew doesn't exist anymore. The new Paul is learning patience from a 6-year-old who insists on naming every stuffed animal before bedtime. Sharon smiled. That's good. Patience is important. So is showing up. Paul pulled her slightly closer. And I'll keep showing up. As long as you'll let me. We'll see, Sharon said. But her eyes said something different. Something that looked like the beginning of hope. Grace appeared beside them, having finished her networking rounds. Are you guys done being weird now? She asked. Because there's cake and I want some. We're done, Sharon assured her. Let's get cake. They walked toward the dessert table together. Grace between them, holding both their hands. A family built from wreckage. A future constructed from the ashes of the past. Paul looked at his daughter, at the woman who had every right to hate him, but had chosen to give him another chance. At the life that had seemed impossible 18 months ago. He thought about the man he had been in that restaurant, celebrating an engagement that meant nothing, building an empire that would never fill the emptiness inside him. That man was gone now. In his place was someone new, someone who understood that showing up mattered more than succeeding, that presence was more valuable than profit, that the most important things could not be bought or controlled or planned. The cake was chocolate, Grace's favorite. She got frosting on her nose and giggled when Paul wiped it off. Dad, she said, can we do this every week? What, get cake on your face? No, silly. Be together. All of us. Paul looked at Sharon. She nodded. Yes, he said. We can do this every week. Promise? Promise. Grace hugged him, then hugged Sharon, then hugged them both together in a complicated 3-person embrace that almost knocked the cake off the table. I love you, she announced. Both of you. We love you too, Sharon replied. So much, Paul added. More than anything. They stood there, in the middle of a gala celebrating Sharon's professional triumph, surrounded by industry leaders and potential clients and people who saw only success. But the real triumph was not the company or the contract or the celebration. The real triumph was this. 3 people who had been broken. 3 people who had found their way back to each other. 3 people who had chosen to build something new from the ruins of what had been destroyed. That is where we leave them. Not at an ending, but at a beginning. A family that is still learning how to be a family. A love that is still healing from its wounds. A future that is uncertain but filled with possibility. If this story has moved you, if you believe in redemption and forgiveness and the power of choosing better every single day, then remember this. Second chances are not given. They are earned. Showing up matters more than any grand gesture. The people who hurt us can become the people who heal us if they're willing to do the work. And it is never too late to become the person you should have been all along. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching until the end. Thank you for believing that stories like this one can matter. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Share this with someone who needs to hear that change is possible. And drop a comment telling me what this story meant to you. Here at Mr. Dalton's Story House, we tell the stories that matter. The ones about love and loss and the hard work of becoming who we are supposed to be. The ones that remind us we are not alone in our struggles. The ones that prove again and again that broken things can be made whole. Until next time. Remember that the story is not over until you decide to stop writing it. Keep showing up. Keep choosing better. Keep believing in the power of transformation. I will see you in the next one.